Hello, welcome to Lazada Insider, featuring knowledge that makes a difference. We share trusted insights, forward-looking perspectives, and exclusive expert interviews to keep you ahead of the curve.
Hi everyone. Sustainability is becoming more important for all businesses across all industries. As the expectations on corporate responsibility increase and as transparency become more prevalent, businesses are recognizing the needs to act on sustainability. Professional communications and good intentions are no longer enough. Today, we are lucky enough to have Tres from Kantar to deep dive into Southeast Asian consumers' priority when it comes to sustainability. Having a solid understanding of this consumer's priority is the cornerstone of a sustainability strategy with impact and authenticity. Tres has been spearheading the Sustainability Foundational Study for the regions to help businesses understand what matters to consumers and how businesses can navigate their sustainable transformations. Hi, Tres. Welcome to Lazada Insider.
Hi, Chen. Thank you for having me. So I think you did a very good kind of, introduction already. So just very few words in terms of what I do. So I head up the sustainable transformation practice for the region based on in Singapore. And as Chen shared, what we do, we really partner with clients in their journey using consumer insights that help the brands formulate the strategy through to activation for both product innovation as well as brand communication. And then obviously, part of that is also measuring the impact on brand equity and also the bottom line. So it's the full marketing cycle that we work with clients on and work across different sectors from FMCG to finance and technology. And it's really about how do we integrate this as part of the business, right? Rather than something at the side. I think that's a really important thing that I hope we can use today's time to kind of share how do we do that as we go through this journey across businesses in the region.
Thanks for the introductions. Let's go straight to today's topics. So when referring back to the United Nations UN Sustainable Development Goals, so when it comes to consumer sustainability attitude and behavior, do you see any Asian consumers behave differently compared to the rest of the world? And do Asian consumers actually care about sustainability?
Probably I'll answer the second part of the question first. Number one is Asia consumers absolutely care, just as the rest of the world. I think that's a non-question, if you like, and we've got data as well from our global foundational sustainability sector index that shows that support about over 50% of consumers in Asia said they will support companies with their time and their money, that the companies that do good either for the planet or society, very much in line with global average. And we also see that over half are also saying they've stopped buying products and services for companies that have a negative impact. So definitely, the consumers care. That's without doubt. In terms of the issues they care about, again, quite similar, because all we've done is we've covered a whole range of issues that covers the 17 SDG goals. And you can see that environmental absolutely kind of in the top 10 list across the world, both for Europe, Americas, as well as APAC. And in Asia, we see the top issues really coming specifically around air pollution, water pollution, the weather events that we've seen. And these are all issues that that I think people in Asia living here would see how this, they're actually seeing that really close to home, right? You actually see the changes in the weather. Us in Singapore, Singapore's a hot place, but I think it's getting hotter, right? We can feel that. And you see all the kind of typhoons and floods that's happening in the region occurring more frequently and ultimately impacting on people's livelihoods as well. So I think consumers absolutely, those are the issues they care about, not just for the wider world, but also kind of they are personally impacted by these environmental issues. So that's what we really see in Asia coming through. So there is commonality for sure, but I think it's also important to kind of understand that different countries and different markets are at different points in the sustainability journey. So if I compare Asia Pac versus Europe, and that's kind of a broad generalization, obviously, because every market is different, but broadly, you do see that markets in Europe, especially the Nordics, they're definitely more developed in their sustainability journey. Consumers are more knowledgeable. I don't think they know everything, but definitely more knowledgeable in terms of kind of broader environmental issues, what carbon emissions are, all those conceptual. They're able to kind of link it into some of the things that brands or companies or governments initiatives are doing and what they can do. So they're really demanding action, and they are, and in cases kind of participating in the action. However, I think in Asia Pac, developing markets in Asia region, markets like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, they absolutely care as well. But I think they're still very much in the early part of the journey in trying to understand, what are these kind of bigger issues that are out in the media that is being talked about, like carbon emission reduction. I mean, these are still very big conceptual topics. I think there's still a lot of awareness to kind of help them really land it in their language and what it means for them directly. And so I think, for Asia Pac, they care, but I think the journey is different, and the job to be done here sits quite a lot still with the awareness generation and build.
So I'm curious to know, so have you observed any differences across different age generation?
Absolutely. I think, again, referencing our global piece, because I think that's where you start seeing patterns, right? And what we have seen is a difference between the younger and the older cohort. The younger is the 1835 and then 35 and above, right? Absolutely kind of a mark, almost a demarcation there. And we see that the older cohort is more orientated towards the environmental issues. While the younger one, they also care about environmental issues, but at the same time, they're also very much focused on the social issues, probably characterized by, the global protests we've seen around the world in the last couple of years. They're deeply concerned, and they also are more aware of the kind of, understanding between the relationship between environmental and social issues, which is quite different, I think, to our older cohort. And I think we call them kind of fundamentally different from a Gen Z perspective, regardless of where they sit around the world. I think we see this commonality, and they are expecting and demanding actions from companies and brands, and they want to be part of that as well. So, and I think probably, the concern here is also much more, they've got probably much more at stake here. Their future's at stake here, right? So they almost, Gen Z around the world is becoming almost the unifying generation that want to take action on sustainability. And what this means as well, I think, from a marketing standpoint, it's not about the abandonment of individualism, but putting a priority on the broader community, and how do you then kind of, brands kind of find that purpose and engage with particularly the Gen Z generation who's wanting that action, and kind of come along the journey with you. But on the flip side, kind of a bit of a word of caution of this group is, there's nowhere to hide with this group. It's easy for them to seek advice of authenticity, and they will share their views if they don't agree, right? So you have to also kind of, to build trust with this group, be candid, be truthful, be authentic. I think that's absolutely key. But this is the distinct mark that we see between the generations when it comes to how they connect with sustainability issues and what they expect.
Yeah, and as you briefly mentioned just now, UN has 17 development goals, and there are also many issues. Different people generations or different countries or regions are concerned about different kind of issues. So how can businesses focus on the issue that matters?
Yeah. So what we've also kind of done through our piece is to look at how issues may differ by sectors, and there's clear differences by sectors. So now what we've done is we looked at the top issues that consumers care about, as I shared earlier. The top ones we see in Asia is water, pollution, weather events, and then there's the list of issues to spend, and there's also kind of social challenges in there as well. But what we've done is take this issues that are important to consumers and link that in terms of what they expect of sectors, of categories. So, and what we see, just taking two examples to kind of bring that to life. We use this framework called shield and sword. So we ask, kind of advise clients to consider using this framework. What shields are basically issues that consumers associate with your category. They almost see you as accountable for the problem, and hence, they expect you to solve it. So, if you're addressing this, it's almost a hygiene factor. You have to address this if consumers associate these issues for you with it in this sector. And then you've got what we call sorts. Sorts are issues that are important for consumers when it comes to sustainability, but they don't necessarily associate that with your category, right? And if you have the ability to also address these issues, these sorts then can potentially become a differentiator for you as a brand, as a company, and also drive leadership, right, in terms of solving these issues in the space. So I think that's the framework. And then if you look at personal care and technology, such as kind of social media platform, when I say technology. So if you contrast these two, if you look at the personal care sector, there are shields, so issues that consumers hold personal care players accountable for are issues like overpackaging, waste, testing on animal cruelty. So that's the shields, right? So they almost expect you to kind of address all this packaging that goes with the products, and also kind of the waste that's kind of created by it in production, or actually, in the final kind of ability to kind of use the product in an efficient and wasteless way. Versus if you look at the technology sector, their shields is about reducing inequality and discrimination, providing fair access in terms of education as well as work. So that's very different in terms of the shield. So it's important to know, for the sector you're in, what are the things that consumers are holding you accountable and expect you to address. And I think that's absolutely a hygiene factor. And then at the same time, not losing sight in terms of what are the things that are sorts, right? The things that you can help you differentiate and take ownership and leadership, and bring that focus on to help you kind of make an impact in this space. So I think that's how we've seen the difference. And it's also important to note that you have to do the shields, the basic expectations, before you kind of try and stretch into the sorts, because you have to address hygiene.
What are some of the key watch out for businesses as they embark on their sustainability journey?
So I think I kind of alluded a bit to that when I was talking about, kind of the sword and the shields, right? Kind of basic hygiene factors versus differentiators. Watch outs really is making sure that you address what is your hygiene factors, because that's what, consumers see you accountable, and kind of hopefully solving that. You kind of created part of the problem, but at the same time, you're actively taking that ownership to solve the problem, right? So I think that's really important to kind of take that. And then I think the key thing beyond that is also being really authentic in terms of how you kind of bring that across on what you're doing, be transparent on that journey, be accountable, right? It has to be consistent across all the different things that you're doing. It cannot be, cannot be seen as an opportunity to make profit, right? Because you can be profitable together with being sustainable, but it cannot be people seeing that you're jumping on the sustainability topic to make profit. So ultimately, the transparency, the consistency that runs across all the initiatives, internal, external, across the organization, will really make that impact. And ultimately, kind of be bold as well, right? This is not easy, as in we're all kind of learning. It's a journey, right? So you may make mistakes, but if you have mistakes, be bold enough to have that conversation and adapt and adapt from there. So I think those would be the principles that we've seen that would help as you kind of go through that journey.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. So if we now shift our focus to Southeast Asia regions, and we know Southeast Asia is a very diverse region. So how do you see the role of the culture in sustainability activations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that I talked about is recognizing that markets are on different parts of the journey. Right? They all care, but they're different. So depending on where they are, is it an awareness job, or is it, one to kind of really bring consumers on board where they're ready for the next step, where they're taking action and be part of a broader movement. So I think that's one lens, first, importantly, to understand where that market sits on that journey in terms of understanding the issues and what they can bring as individuals to the objective that you're trying to drive, or change you're trying to drive. That's number one. I think once you've had that clarity, I think knowing the culture within markets is also really important, right? Knowing how people kind of use plastics, for example, in their everyday life, right? Because plastics has kind of probably been a big topic, right? It can be villain, but at the same time, it also can bring convenience and create livelihoods for people in this region. So understanding those issues in terms of their current culture, and how then can you then find the enablers for change, or understanding the barriers, would allow you to kind of have that effective impact and every culture will be different in terms of their understanding of of the context. And if you think about Australia, for example, is another contrast where from culturally, they've always been very kind of nature is as one, and they're very much a almost a take on a conservator role, right, of nature, of the oceans. And again, understanding that culture, and hence, what as a business or organization you are kind of doing in that space, and how that then links in with Australian values and cultures will also really be important to have a successful impact.
Cool. Speaking about the barriers and taking actions, I wanted to deep dive into this topic a bit more. So, from your opinions, so what are some of the common key barriers for Southeast Asian consumers from taking actions, and how can brands or businesses remove those barriers?
Good question. First things first, awareness. I think in this region, particularly the developing markets, I think there's still a role for helping consumers understand the kind of the issues and what brands are doing, governments are doing, what kind of and then what they and as individuals can bring to the table. I think once that kind of that's happening, I think the three key barriers that we typically see for behavioral change in being more sustainable, right? Whether it's about reducing the plastic you use, or trying to buy less new and use secondhand, or kind of eating produce that are a bit more environmentally friendly. For example, maybe reducing your meat consumption or buying fruits that are local or in season, etc. So these are all the specific actions, right, that you can take to be more sustainable. But what we see in the barriers typically to kind of actually the intent is that they want to, but we don't actually always see the level of behavior or adoption of sustainable products and services or initiatives as high as the intent. The barriers, I would say, is cost sometimes. Yeah, the cost sometimes, I think what we see is companies are putting a cost onto the consumer, and if the cost can't be justified, I think that could be a barrier. So cost is one. The comfort. So it's almost like the habit, right? I'm used to doing certain things a certain way. So not, trying to kind of change the habit is hard. I mean, even myself, I buy my coffee outside. Every time when I can get my coffee, I say, oh my God, I forgot my reusable cup, right? Because that's a habitual change, right? You need to be able to kind of pack into a habit, have your bag, have your reusable cup in your bag on a daily basis. So those are you're changing your habits and rituals. So I think that's a big barrier as well. How can you make that habit become part of what you do? Or sustainable habit part of what you do. And then the third barrier we see is around the risk of the experience, right? So it's almost like sometimes because it's a bit new and what's out there, maybe I'm not sure whether if it's a food, if I take a food example, if I have it, maybe this meatless plant-based meat may not taste as good as as this burger that I'm craving to go with my fries, right? There's almost a risk of the experience, of the taste experience. It could be, and that's also stopping potentially consumers to kind of adopt the new options out there. So I would say in summary, three barriers you see: cost, the comfort of staying in what you're doing today, and also kind of avoiding the risk of a different experience to what you what you have from your current option. So those are the three barriers. And in terms of how to overcome then is again taking these three barriers, right, and flip it on its head and say, how can we make these all as a holistic kind of proposition? I don't think it's sustainable cannot be a benefit on its own, right? As what we, why are consumers buying the service or the product? Understanding the tension in there and trying to then kind of develop that overall into a proposition that is easy for consumers to understand, is meaningful and rewarding, is kind of the key principles of overcoming that that barrier, and is really back to kind of consumer tension, right? Why this service, beyond the fact that it's going to reduce the carbon footprint, for example, it also has to kind of make sure that it accounts for that experience, or the experience should still be as good or maybe compensated by other parts of the experience for what the consumer is looking for.
Cool. Last but not least, do you have any other business advices you want to share with our audiences?
I think I've probably talked about this in a few parts, but I think it's really important, as we go on this journey, it has to be, businesses have to be bold, right? it is a journey that we are embarking, and there's no kind of a set path, right? We know where we may know what are the things that we want to change, but there's a lot of things along the way that may not be what we expect. So I think it's important to be bold, courageous, take and authenticity is absolutely important. I think it's part of this journey for that successful transformation to happen.
That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks, Tres, for your great insight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is Lazada Insider. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you click follow and subscribe so you don't miss our latest insights and expert interviews. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, take care.